There's something strange in Spyro A Hero's Tale that always mystified me as a kid. Take a look in front of Sergeant Bird here in Dragon Village. Do you see it? No? Well, perhaps you can hear it. It gets stranger. If you stand still, Spyro can turn his head to look at this mysterious entity. And you can even smack it on its head with a horn dive. This is the only Sergeant Bird in the game where this happens. What could this thing be? Let's go back in time to a month before the final game, in the August 3rd, 2004 prototype build. Here, the entity doesn't even try to hide, because it has a shadow and it blocks your breath attacks. To get a clearer picture, we have to go even further back. This is the E3 demo, nearly 5 months before the final game. You're not supposed to reach Sergeant Bird's area in this build, but it still exists, and with some hacks we can reach this unfinished area. Speaking to Sergeant Bird here is very different from the final game. The dialogue is obviously placeholder, but something weird happens when you hit yes to start the minigame. In the final game, it just immediately fades to black, but not here. Instead, you suddenly swap over to Sergeant Bird and walk towards the gate. When he reaches the gate, it tries loading the minigame, but since it wasn't featured in this demo, it just crashes the game. To get a better idea of what the developers were trying to do here, let's look at how swapping between Spyro and Hunter works in the game. You might think that you just lose control of your character and then gain control of the other, but that's not the case. There's actually only one playable character loaded at any given time. Instead, there are actually two separate NPCs here, one for Spyro and one for Hunter, but only the NPC for the character you're not playing as is set to be visible. When you speak with the other character and say yes to swap to them, what actually happens is that the player is transformed into the other character, teleports to where that character's NPC was, and then the two NPCs have their visibilities toggled. This all happens very quickly, so it appears seamless. Looking back on the Sergeant Bird case in the demo, it's pretty clear that they were trying to do something similar here. The player is turned into Sergeant Bird, teleports to the Sergeant Bird NPC, then the Sergeant Bird NPC turns invisible, and a Spyro NPC turns visible. Given what we now know, we can make the educated guess that this mystery entity in front of Sergeant Bird is actually a leftover from this interaction, and that it's an invisible Spyro NPC. But to prove this, let's dive into the nitty-gritty. There are two triggers here that both spawn NPCs, and they have what are called game scripts tied to them, which is basically scripting code that lets the developer add extra behavior for triggers. I recently made a tool for inspecting these triggers, which also lets us view the game scripts. Here is the trigger for the mystery entity. We can already see that it's meant to show Spyro's NPC model. If we open up the game script, we can see how this trigger behaves. This onCreate procedure runs when the trigger is loaded, and this onMessage procedure is run when the trigger receives a message from another trigger. You can see it's made to become invisible when created, and become visible when it receives a message. In the demo, the Sergeant Bird NPC trigger is programmed to send a message to the Spyro NPC trigger to make it visible. But this has been removed, so the Spyro NPC just stays invisible forever. However, we can patch the map file so that this game script instead makes the NPC visible on its creation. So, if we now approach Sergeant Bird, voila, the mystery entity reveals itself. And it was just Spyro all along. A childhood mystery finally solved. I think it's very cool that remnants of earlier ideas in development can still be found many years after release. Anyway, this was just a little thing I found interesting. I hope you did too. Thanks for watching.